you guys. This is fun.
Glad you're here.
I keep on telling myself that. It seems easy compared to those BRB nights.
I wish you were with us for the Krebs issue. Just the paper yesterday.
No.
Front page of the truth. This guy wants to move his house to like for a big estate. And we made it for his 2 days before his appeals.
Oh, really?
It's weird.
Are we going to see it?
We'll come to this board. We'll come to the zoning board. I'm on that one.
You're what, for punishment?
Yes. That's why I'm kind of having everybody on this one. What is it?
When do you review that? When's your next meeting?
25th. It's our third meeting.
Oh, is it really? Oh my gosh.
Now it's like nuts big because it's front page of the Tribune.
Yeah, it is.
You should look at the card.
I'm gonna check it all out, sure.
Look,
I can
Monster
take
Joey
action
on my
next
cell phone.
Yeah.
Sure we will.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the November 13th, 2013 meeting of the City of Lake Forest Plan Commission. I am Michael Lay. I'm chairman of the commission. And at this time, I would like to introduce the members of the commission who are here this evening. To my far right is Commissioner Berg, and then Commissioner Culbertson. To my far left is Commissioner Kuchman and Ziccarelli. From city staff, Ms. Zerniak is here tonight. And our first item of business is approval of some minutes. I believe they're still in process, so we will move on from item number 2 to item number 3, which is a public hearing and action. Pardon me? Okay. Yes? I'll try to get closer to the microphone. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. You're welcome. The first item is a public hearing and action on consideration of a request for both tentative and final approval of a plat for the Green Briar Resubdivision. 2 lots are proposed. The property is located at 700 Green Briar Lane in Lake Forest. Property owner is 700 Green Briar LLC, Peter Winter, and the representatives of the group tonight are Peter Witmer, the architect, and Pat Bleck from Bleck Engineering. First, I would ask whether or not members of the commission have any ex-parte contacts or conflicts of interest on this matter.
No.
Seeing none, we'll proceed. At this time, I would like to swear in everyone who thinks they might want to speak on this issue, either in support of or in opposition to what we have before us. If you would like to testify and plan to testify, please stand, if you would, please. Okay. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you are about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Thank you very much. First, I would call on Mr. Witmer.
Yes.
Very good. Welcome, and please proceed.
Thank you. This is a relatively straightforward re-subdivision. The property currently is 2 lots. I have it up here on the screen. One lot to the west is 100-foot wide, and then the other lot is 50-foot wide. They're both 300 feet deep. There's an existing residence located on the parcel to the west. And really the main issue with this is water, and how do we engineer it, and how do we really better the situation that's currently there. And we've hired Bleck and Associates. They've had a lot of history in this area, done a lot of work in this area, and I think they've come up with solutions that really make a lot of sense and improve the situation that is currently in this area. So this is the existing, and then basically what we're proposing is to make 2 equal lots, so 2 equal 75 foot by 300 feet deep lots that meets the existing zoning in the area, so they'll be conforming lots, and allows us then to also create some future drainage easements that would make sense. I'm going to let Pat Bleck go through the ideas of the drainage, the concept of the drainage for everyone to review. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Patrick Bleck, Bleck Engineering. The existing property right now has some overland flow through the property, and that the gray shaded area that's showing up on this drawing shows the overland conveyance area. Water overtops Green Briar and drains to the north and then to the east behind the house that's immediately to the east of this property. So this is the existing conveyance area of the property. What we're proposing to do is basically accept that overland flow and put it back to where it exists right now along the east property line, so that we're maintaining the same flow patterns, the same storage volumes, and protecting the proposed houses.
Okay.
Okay.
I just, we had a meeting with, we originally, when we purchased the property, met with the city engineers and reviewed our original thoughts of it. And then we had another meeting with the neighbor to the south, or to the east, which experiences flooding in the past. And so we really, truly do feel that we understand the issues here, and that we can improve the situation and really make future developments of these properties more viable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Issues presented by staff?
Thank you, Chairman Lay. This is a straightforward subdivision. This area, the north side of Green Briar, was subdivided in the 1920s and built out over a series of decades. The house that currently exists on this property was constructed in the 1950s. And over time, over the decades, there were several property line shifts in this area. At one point in time, the property now proposed for subdivision was configured as 3 50-foot wide lots. There was a house constructed on it. The previous owner lived there for many years, and that property, as part of her estate, was now made available for redevelopment. What is proposed is a 2-lot re-subdivision. So there would be 2 75-foot wide lots created. Each of those lots would exceed the minimum square footage in the applicable zoning district. The properties on the north side of Green Briar are deeper than most properties, deeper and larger than most properties in this neighborhood, because that area to the north of the houses along the rear property lines, that originally was a ravine. And when this area was first developed, there was much less awareness of ravines. Today, we wouldn't allow a subdivision that actually filled in a ravine area. So water does tend to run in an east-west direction across the back of those lots. What redevelopment of these two lots will do is allow us to push the east-west flow of water a little bit further back on the lots. You do have a condition recommended by the city engineer that would require that prior to the issuance of building permits for either of these lots, that a drainage easement be recorded on the property. That would require that the area within the drainage easement remain free of structures and anything that could impede the flow of water. What this will do over time as other lots in this neighborhood redevelop, we will be able to continue to better control the area within which water now flows. The primary issue that has been raised with this subdivision is the concern about drainage, and there is no question the property directly to the east has experienced flooding in the past. There are some things that could be done on that property, but certainly as that property redevelops, what is being proposed for these new lots will set that property up to allow redevelopment to occur in a manner that is going to protect that house a lot more from flooding. It may be that Mr. Bleck could describe this a bit more, but there is a proposal to replace an existing storm sewer that is located on that property. The issue in this area is that during very heavy storm events, that there is a surge that occurs from the intersection of Winston and Green Briar. And that is what then flows northward and then flows in an east direction across the backs of these properties. And the history of that, it really does go back to the fact that the back areas of these lots was originally depressional, and water will continue and in fact is required to be allowed to continue across the backs of those lots. From a zoning perspective, the proposed subdivision does meet and exceed all of the requirements for the zoning district. The actual site plans and approval of the houses is something that would occur later on, and that would go through the city's standard building review board process. In a case like this, the building review board normally does require that the grading and drainage plans be reviewed at the front end of that process rather than after the architectural review is completed. That concludes my report, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy. Next, we'll go to questions or requests for clarification from the commissioners to either the petitioner or staff.
I have nothing at this time, I'm sorry.
Nothing, Mike.
Just to make sure I understand this correctly, the condition after the subdivision and proposed swaling, the actual runoff is going to be further to the rear of the existing property rather than the condition that exists now.
That's correct.
So you're actually improving it just from that standpoint.
That's what we were saying, that it really kind of sets up for the lot. You know, right now the runoff is right here.
Yeah.
And you can see this. You know, so this is the area now, and it comes off here. So we're moving it back, you know, to the north, and then, so they have a better buildable lot, and then obviously next door, then they'll be able to do the same thing for that too. Correct.
Thank you. And one more question. Were this not to be subdivided, hypothetically, because it's one property, could someone actually demolish the existing home and build a rather large, out of context sized house? This is for staff, I think.
Yes, the lot as it exists today, 150 feet wide, is considered a single zoning lot. So yes, someone could come in, request approval of demolition of the house, and construct a house that meets the square footage that would be allowed on that larger size lot.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Peter, before you sit down, I believe the intention here is to create two buildable lots.
Correct.
I noticed, looking at them today, that there are a lot of mature trees on the lots. They surround the house that's there now, but if you demolish that house and wanted to construct homes on each of the two lots, it seemed to me that some trees would have to go.
That's correct.
Could you speak to that issue?
Yeah, we had Mariani Landscape and had them come out and take a look at the trees. There really isn't any heritage specimen trees, but you're correct. There will be a number of trees that need to be removed in the rear to create the two lots. The part that the eastern or the north end, then we can, everything can remain up there. But there's a couple of trees that we'll like to work around on the west side, but I think on the east side it's pretty clear too. But there are some trees that need to be removed. You're exactly right.
I wasn't able to really determine the condition of the trees that are there.
That was the first thing that we looked at, if there was any, really great specimens. But going through that with the arborist, with Mariani, they didn't feel any of the trees were really, specimen quality.
Right. Kathy, would staff require some replacement?
Yes, the removal of the trees would be considered by the Building Review Board at the time they reviewed the site plan in the proposed house. And the code does require inch-for-inch replacement with an exception for trees that are diseased or dead, and in the case of removal of any significant trees, of higher quality trees, the staff could also require double inch-for-inch replacement. If that replacement can't occur on the property, then we work with the developer to have street trees in the vicinity of the property.
Thank you.
I have one or two questions. Mr. Witmer, is there any significance to the fact that on the right illustration there, the shading portion ends, at least the eastern portion and west, end at the lot line? Does that imply that there is going to be no problem? And then, of course, on the lot to the east, you see an arrow over onto the property to the east. Is that where the water will go?
Yeah,
Or are you?
Pat could answer this, but let me just give it in sort of simple terms. We basically can't change the outflow of the current outflow of water from that property to the neighbor's property. So we can't change any grading at the property line. So if you notice the comparison of where the arrow is here,
Yes.
and the arrow is here, it has to stay the same spot. We can't alter that.
Right.
The code.
That's under the Illinois State Drainage Law, that we have to accept the water coming onto the property, and then we have to discharge the water at the same location where it's leaving the property, currently leaving the property right now.
But that implies to me that the water from that shaded area is going to go east right into the property owner's.
Yes, and that's
Lot.
how it exists today, is the water, when it does overtop and go over land, it does go around the house to the east and continues going through the backyards of all the houses on Green Briar, all the way down to Sheridan Road before it gets down to the ravine.
The pattern
correct.
of drainage could be modified if there was an agreement or an interest from the neighbor. There could be a joint project, but as part of development of these lots, the city can't force that, the neighbor can't force that, but there could be the opportunity. It certainly presents the opportunity as that lot to the east is redeveloped in the future. It sets the stage for that water flow to be pushed further back and create a much more suitable building pad on that lot.
Well, one last question. Will this subdivision and that drainage easement exacerbate the amount of water flowing from the two proposed subdivided lots onto the property to the east?
This project will not adversely impact the property to the east more than what's happening currently under current conditions.
All right, thank you. Any further questions of either staff or the petitioner? Seeing none, At this time, I would like to invite comments from the public. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to speak. So when you come forward, please come forward. Please identify yourself with your name and your address, please.
Hi, I'm Ann Russell, the property to the east. I've lived here 30 years, and there's always been flooding in this area. My understanding of a subdivision is there has to be enough land and the drainage plan to take the water from that land has to be so it won't hurt the person living next to it. And from the explanation of the plans for drainage, it was a larger storm sewer, and that surcharges during periods of heavy rain. So I can't see how, since there's much more hardscape on that property, I can't see how I won't be adversely affected by that. And I guess that's what I have to say. And I am, of course, I really don't care what the house next to me looks like. As far as I'm concerned, they can subdivide it and make 2 houses there. But I don't want it to put my property under. And that's basically what I hear. I would like the decision tonight to be postponed until I can hire my own engineer to understand what's going on. Mr. Bleck was my engineer, but now he's working for the property next door. So I need time to try to find someone who can explain to me that this is not going to make my situation worse. Because as an amateur person, it certainly looks like it makes my situation worse to me. Because to me, the problem is the intersection of Winston and Green Briar, which is where all this water comes from, which should be going into the storm sewers. And I don't understand why, when you're making a new development, you would continue that pattern of accepting street water, which is really what's causing the problem for the homeowners as it flows to the ravine. And that's what I'd like to say.
Okay. Thank you very much for your testimony. Sir?
My name is Steve Amadei. I live at 680 Green Briar. Now, like she said, when heavy rains come down, we got a problem in the backyard. The last time change from fall to spring, or from spring, whatever, I was 3 o'clock in the morning to 8:30 at night pumping my window wells. At one point, I had 3 rivers going in my backyard. We got cherry pumping water in my backyard, and there's all wetlands back there. So what they do to those properties affects me, affects everybody down the line. And that's the whole point, is that when you do something like this, you got wetlands, you got water coming through, and I'm tired of pumping my window wells. Thank you.
Sir, what's your address on?
680 Green Briar.
680? Okay.
Yep. I'm west.
Thank you.
That's the whole point. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next person to testify, please. Okay, I think there's probably 3 people who indicated at the outset that they might be wishing to testify. I would just ask one last time, provide an opportunity for you to come forward if you wish to say something. Okay. Okay, staff response to public testimony.
Again, it is clear that the concern along Green Briar is drainage. The city engineer has carefully looked at this. It is an,
Excuse me, I think we missed a step here. Opportunity for cross-examination. I have before me a public hearing appearance form of Ann Russell, who wishes to.
That was me.
Do you wish to cross-examine?
I guess I'll pass it this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, please proceed. Sorry.
there is no question that there is concern about drainage and flooding in the Green Briar area. It is a condition that was created many, many decades ago, and as lots are redeveloped, there is an opportunity to shift the area within which that water flows. The water will flow, given the fact that there was a ravine back in that area. There is a surcharging that occurs during very heavy storm events. What this subdivision will do is create 2 lots. It will add the condition that a drainage easement be established, be recorded on the deed prior to the issuance of building permits for the lot. So we begin to restrict the area, control a little bit better the area within which that water flows. The city engineer did not only review the subdivision, but also reviewed example plans of how these lots might be developed to assure that the proposed solution here did in fact work. As I think was mentioned, we did meet with Ms. Russell. We do recognize her concerns. City engineer was part of that meeting along with Mr. Witmer and Mr. Bleck. Through this subdivision, the existing problems of neighboring properties can't be solved, but the solution presented here sets a very good framework toward beginning to solve those problems as future redevelopment occurs.
I have a question about that. So when my property is redeveloped, it's pretty much tied to what this plan they've already established. So I don't see that.
Mr. Bleck, if you'd be willing to talk through that is correct. This does set a framework. In fact, I believe in the opinion of the city engineer, making Ms. Russell's property more available for redevelopment.
Yes, I looked at Mrs. Russell's property a few years ago and came up with some solutions to protect her residence, and prepared plans for that, and the plans were never followed through, but there is some simple resolution to her problem by doing some flood protection around the back of her property, and that could help her situation quite a bit. The improvements that are proposed for these 2 lots would not change the condition of her situation right now, and if her property was redeveloped, there's some opportunity there to really enhance that lot and improve it with a new structure on the lot, elevating it up to a flood protection elevation above the floodplain in that area.
Can I just speak to that?
Ma'am?
What it does is it
Ma-
ties
ma'am.
my property, it's very close by the house. You're allowing the property next to me to have the flood way in the back. So when they go to develop my property, I would like to say I would like to live there for a while longer. Then how, the part of the property that's good is the extreme depth of it. And how, if they've already set the water pattern through the middle of it, that helps. I don't understand.
Mr. Bleck, let me ask you a question. What would be, well, let me ask this. What is your opinion as to the reason that your advice was not followed to ameliorate at least the problem on this property that you have the diagram up there for?
I think it was an economic situation.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I would like to speak to that. His solution was to have outdoor sump pumps. Now, the sump pumps are pumping the water in the same place that the water's coming from. I did not see that as a viable solution, and other people I've talked to have said the same thing. That outdoor sump pumps that just pump where the water already is not helpful.
Thank you. Okay. Kathy?
Mr. Bleck, could you clarify that the plan you have does direct the water back to Ms. Russell's property at the point where it currently enters the property, but it also allows the opportunity at some time in the future when the lot is redeveloped to better align that crossover point further back on the lot to provide a an improved building pad?
Our concept grading plan is, one second. Where'd it go? There it is. Here. Okay. So, this.
So basically what you're saying is that here's the outflow now by the redevelopment.
Not sure yet.
Yeah. Here's the existing outflow right now. This shaded area is an area that floods during this condition. And with the proposed concept plan with putting 2 structures out on each one of these lots, the overland flow would extend down the middle of the 2 lots and then leave the property on the east side at the same location where it's exiting the property right now. Is that what you were looking for, Kathy?
But at some point in the future, when Ms. Russell's lot may be redeveloped, that crossover point could be shifted back if a developer of that lot chose to do
Right.
that.
Well, we're coming down to this southern point on the house. This is where Mrs. Russell's patio is in the back. But that could easily be shifted further to the north and be more northern, up northern of the property, away from the house, very easily. And the easement that would be provided for this lot would allow modifications on this lot to change the grading a little bit to enhance that area, yes.
So you can redirect the flow over the property line.
If the neighbor downstream is willing to accept it in a different location,
Well, maybe
or
that's...
if the property downstream is being developed, you have to accept it coming onto your property. You can move it around on your property.
You don't have to redevelop your property, though, to alter it. Is that the case?
There would have to be some type of agreement to,
It could just be a site grading agreement. It doesn't have
Yes.
to be that she has to tear her house down and build a new one.
correct, yes. No, it'd be grading.
Because it almost looks to me like what you've done in the middle of your lot is a really spectacular job of taking if you could put both those images over the screen at the same time as you had a minute ago. Is it all right if I just start talking, or is this?
Yes.
Please.
Right now, the diagonal flow, as we can see, is going right for her rear corner. And what you've done with this subdivision into 2 lots is you funneled it down the middle, and I'd say that's a spectacular improvement. And if I was a neighbor, I would be so excited about that. I mean, not only do you put it down the property line, but you're putting a house in the way of it. So you've really done a great job of blocking. And then as the guy runs with the ball between the 2 blockers, it just seems like now it's kind of fallen back again. And I know that there are certain regulations and we have a lot of legislation in our state. And perhaps maybe this particular necessity to bring it all the way back again, almost halfway to the street, is something, maybe that's the key here, is to somehow negotiate that through some kind of an arrangement that doesn't require extensive redevelopment of the neighbor's lot, but maybe some kind of a, I mean, these are really deep lots. These are lots on steroids compared to the other lots, so there's a lot of room. I'm just wondering, as we work through this, I find the subdivision concept to be thoroughly pleasing in a lot of different ways, and I'm wondering if maybe there's some way we can explore this drainage issue on that last curve. It perhaps may solve some of the other neighbors' problems as well. It's kind of a deliberation, if I may.
Sure. Augie?
Pat, with the greater length of travel, I assume there's greater absorption. Any idea in terms of percentage, what could be expected from what is there now versus the improved condition? Is 20% going to be absorbed, 30%? Can you say by way of calculations what the difference would be for that added length of travel?
The length of travel is going to increase. As far as absorption, I couldn't put a percentage value on it.
Okay.
It's a small area, so we're not talking about big numbers to start with. The storage volume underneath that flood area is not decreasing at all, so we're not accelerating the runoff onto the property to the east.
Would you be willing to entertain a holdover of this to allow further discussion between you and the property owner, both to the east and the west?
I think the cooperation between the two properties makes a lot of sense to me. I would say that I'm a little hesitant to do that until we actually have the houses designed and we see how the backyards are and all the pieces come together for that. And that's really when we'll get to the, we've spent a lot of time and money and energy coming up and saying, yes, this will work, it'll meet the code, all the engineering works. The city has agreed to that, we're fine with that. I think it doesn't make a lot of sense to do the grading plan until we submit for the house design, because that's when we know where the patio will be, where all the pieces will be. And at that time, it makes sense to work with the neighbor to shift. Our concept grading plan right now allows it to move significantly north, the outflow. We can't do that without, changing the grading on the other side. The thing that's a little bit more complicated than you see here is on the other side of her property, the water comes down across the other side. It's just as low. So, it's a bigger problem than just moving the inflow up to the north, and then because it goes then diagonally across her property to match up with the other one. So I think, for us, I don't see where we're going to go by moving this and cooperating with the neighbor. Really, the cooperation needs to happen when we actually go for the house design and the final grading plan. That makes more sense to me. We're not going to be able to get the house approved and get the building permit until that grading plan passes. And at that time, it makes sense to me to do, if there's a solution that works with the neighbor at that time.
Thank you. Kathy, does the grading plan come back to the Plan Commission?
No, it would not. The Plan Commission purview is just the subdivision, but you could consider, again, I'll call your attention to the recommendation language regarding recording of a drainage easement on both of these properties, but you could add a condition, just hearing your discussion, that required that prior to consideration of new homes, the site plan and new homes for these properties, the petitioner needs to demonstrate that they have shared the grading plan with the neighboring property owner and offered the opportunity to coordinate. And again, you can't force a neighboring property owner to make grading changes, but we could word a condition that would, normally the grading plan is not required by the Building Review Board. In this case, we could craft a condition that requires that grading and drainage plan as part of the Building Review Board's review, and prior to that, require that it be shared with the neighboring property owner to offer an opportunity for an independent engineer to review and advise her.
Thank you. Okay, discussion by the commission?
I like the staff's suggestion that was just made with respect to establishing a condition to approval.
I do as well.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Kathy, does the city engineer agree with Mr. Bleck's assessment that no additional runoff will occur as a result of the replatting of the subdivision and the plan that's theoretically proposed here?
Yes, and that would be reaffirmed at the time homes are actually proposed in drainage plans. But yes, in theory, he absolutely agrees, and the drainage plan would be required to prove that out.
And is there any reason to believe that a replanting of this lot would result in essentially a reversal of flow, of the current flow of water onto the western portion of the site where Mr. Amadei's land is located?
No, the replatting does none of that. It is the drainage plan that would be reviewed in accordance with Illinois drainage law at a future date.
Right, okay.
I'm not sure the city engineer has been out to the property.
Well, under the condition that's, the additional condition that's being proposed, he would have to get involved, would he not, Kathy?
Yes, any final grading and drainage plan would require review and approval by the city engineer. And after our meeting, he actually did confirm, he is a fairly new city engineer. We've been involved with Ms. Russell's property in the past, but he did confirm that he will absolutely visit the site, and I will accompany him.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the commission? A motion to be in order? Can I ask unanimous consent that we add the third condition as outlined by Kathy? Is there any objection to
I
that?
feel comfortable with that.
Okay, seeing none, that will be added to, but I think we ought to have a motion to incorporate then the first two plus the third conditions that will have to be satisfied prior to the recording of the plat of the subdivision. Discussion on the motion, or do we have a motion?
I make that motion that we approve the petition as submitted with the first two conditions and the third condition as described by staff this evening.
I'll second.
Okay, discussion? I would just say, Ms. Russell, that if this motion passes, you will still have opportunity at several points along the way to get further discussion going between you. You will certainly have time to retain independent engineering advice and services, and I would. No, but it will be, no, it will, all we're approving is the if the motion carries, we are approving the subdivision of the lots. However, nothing can be built on this until it goes back through the process of the conditions being met and of the grading and all of that. Drainage plan will go before the Building Review Board as part of the consideration for whatever is proposed to be built on those properties. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Yolanda Wilson, and I reside at 810 Green Briar Lane. I'm on the northwest corner of Green Briar and Sheridan. And I was not notified about this meeting, and I wonder how many other residents were not notified. Ann was kind enough to come to my door and tell me about the meeting. I think we're all impacted by this. The drainage problem is a real serious problem. I have water pooling and the backside, north side of my property, close to Sheridan. And I don't understand why I was not notified, and I don't know how many other people were not notified.
Your address is 810 Greenbrier?
810, yes, sir.
Kathy, can you explain?
Public notice was mailed, as required by the code, to properties 3 deep around the property.
Okay.
In fact, we did exceed that, the mailing notice, but it is not, the notice does not cover the entire neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion of the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion with the 3 conditions indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Yeah, for those, who are here concerned about the drainage, there will be ample all this does is allows the property to be subdivided. And there'll be opportunities along the way for the discussion that you've asked for, I believe, to occur. Okay? Thank you. Okay, the next item to come before us is an informational presentation. I want to emphasize that this is not a scheduled formal public hearing pursuant to the ordinance. This is an informational presentation of proposed revisions to a previously approved plan for a portion of the Amberley Woods development located on the southeast corner of Route 60 and Saunders Road. The plan proposes a retail restaurant and service development. A Whole Foods market is part of that commercial development. I would emphasize that no commission action on this item is requested of this item, so this tonight is only going to be an informational session for the benefit of the commission, and then to decide what further analyses or questions or whatever need to be resolved from it. At this point, I would ask members of the commission if they have any ex-parte contacts or conflicts of interest on this matter.
Mr. Chairman, due to potential conflict of interest, I am recusing myself from consideration of this petition.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman Lay, I'd also like to ask to recuse. I'm involved with a project, an adjoining piece of property, and I think that that would make my participation in this a conflict of interest.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. For purpose of, so that people here know what's going on, they have recused themselves from consideration of this matter to avoid potential actual or potential conflicts of interest. This, however, since it's only an informational session, please do not be concerned about lack of a quorum, because what we will do for those Plan Commission members, Commissioner Carris and Commissioner Anderson, who will further consider this matter, we're going to require that they view a video taping of this meeting, so they will be brought up to speed when the matter comes back to us for a formal public hearing and any potential action at this point. So you don't need to be concerned about a lack of a quorum at this point. So, so we have the Shiner Group on behalf of SCP Amberley and so forth. I see, please identify yourself and welcome. And
Chairman, thank you very much, and commissioners. My name is Bill Shiner. I'm the chairman of the Shiner Group. We have entered into a joint venture to develop the parcel with the existing partners, with the existing owners, the Supera family, with the intention of developing a shopping center. Before I start in the informational part, just an aside, we've been working on this project with staff, and particularly Kathy Cerniak, for close to a year, and she has been great in giving us advice, and I want to thank her for all the efforts to get us to the point where we're at today, which is making a presentation to the city. You know, I've been developing for close to 30 years, in fact, just over 30 years, and it's not often that developers get to come to the city of Lake Forest or communities like that. So for us, if we're fortunate enough to be approved, it's a crowning achievement for us, and we are very, very proud to be here. And we're very proud to introduce this project, which is anchored, we hope, if it gets approved, by Whole Foods. We think that Whole Foods is the type of tenant that Lake Forest would want to have, and certainly Whole Foods wants to be in a community like Lake Forest. It certainly meets a lot of their goals, and that is going to be what we're going to be presenting to the city, to the Plan Commission, and hopefully ultimately to the board. A little bit about us. As I said, we've been in business. This is our 30th year. We've been primarily food and drug anchored shopping center developers. We've done close to 80 projects, both in land development, retail development, and almost 8 million square feet of total retail. Our projects are primarily in Illinois, but we have projects in Indiana, joint ventures in North Carolina, Minneapolis, St. Paul, a project in California and Ohio. And so, as I said, we don't get a lot of opportunities to do a project like this, and we hope that you'll be as excited as we are about this project. Scattered throughout this crowd is our team tonight. Sam Ankin, who's standing there, who's going to be working the board, is a principal in the Shiner Group. and will be actively involved and has been actively involved in this development. We also have Scott Salisbury, the Regional Vice President of Whole Foods, who will speak. Peter Theodore, who's the architect on this project. Mike Bleck, who's the engineer. Tim Sjogren is here to make a presentation, who's our traffic engineer. David McCallum is our landscape engineer. And David Shaw is our zoning attorney, who won't be speaking tonight, but will be here. You know, one of the great things about being a developer, and one of the things that I really love about it, is when you get a piece of property like this, it's like a puzzle, and you've got to put all the pieces together. And so when you look at a blank slate, I think it's an exaggeration to call developers artists, because I'm not sure that's what we really are. But when we look at it, we get to create some ideas that we hope and we think the city is going to be excited about, and certainly that we are. And when you take a look at any project, what you have to look at is the various interests. The city has an interest. Whole Foods has an interest of having a functional shopping center. Clearly, the neighbors have interest in what it looks like. Traffic, the neighboring and surrounding visual sight lines of the project. All these things you have to put together. And one of the things that we're proud of is that we tried very hard and have gotten to the point where we think we've met most of the interest and looked at everything very carefully. As an example, obviously the city has an interest in how this looks. And the first thing we looked about is, what does Conway Farms look like? What are the materials? What do the buildings look like? What are the things that would make this attractive as a gateway into the city of Lake Forest? Peter Theodore is going to talk about it in depth. One of the things we wanted to do is tie in the materials and the look of Conway Farms. So when people come in, they know it's about Conway, they know it's West Lake Forest, and they'll see that. And if you look at the landscaping, and Dave McCallum's going to talk about it in detail, we created berming, we created areas of interest, we created different types of landscaping to give this what we think is an extraordinary feel. But this project is not, this is not the first time this project's come before the city of Lake Forest. It has come back and has come through the city prior, and is originally zoned for an office project of 3 stories in height with a restaurant use. The total usage of that project was about 95,000 square feet. What we're calling for instead of 3 stories, a series of single-story buildings that will be approximately 71,000 square feet, or in fact 24,000 square feet less of absorption on this site. Our FAR is under 20%, which is below the vast majority of shopping centers. FAR is floor area ratio, which is the amount of building space per land area. And so we've reduced what was previously approved in the total amount of square footage. We're not here unless Whole Foods is here. We think that Whole Foods is the premier retailer today in our market, certainly, and now across the country. And for us, it's a privilege to work with them, and we are proud to bring them into Lake Forest. Scott will talk about who they are and what they plan on doing. I'm not going to get into that. But we think Whole Foods is the perfect match for Lake Forest, and we believe Lake Forest feels the same. Lake Forest will feel the same about Whole Foods. One of the things that we did that we thought was really important, not only working with Kathy and staff to come up with various issues that has been pointed out, but we made a certain point of meeting with the neighborhood groups. I can't say that we've met with all of them, but we've met with most of them. If we haven't met with the members of those community groups, then we've met with their boards. We have gone through and heard what some of their issues were and try to incorporate those issues. As an example, we met with Ann Danner and the Amberley Woods condo project and looked at some of the things that they were concerned about. Obviously, some traffic, everyone's mentioned traffic concerns, which we'll talk about. But as an example, if you look at the Whole Foods building, there's a call for a second tower. And so when that second tower is built, the people in the first tower will have no view corridor of that building at all. They'll be completely blocked. And the other thing, as a developer, that you want to look at things that neighbors will not want to see. They'll not want to see rooftop units, so we've designed it so that everything is screened. We've used materials like shake roofs so that people will be looking at things that they'd normally look at with their neighbors. We've looked at the lighting design, and the ordinance in the city calls for no light to spill over the property lines. We've taken care of that. Sam Ankin's going to talk about dealing with our neighbor who's going to be developing the homes and the things we looked at there. It is putting a jigsaw puzzle together. It's making sure that our neighbors to the south are protected as they develop their homes. The neighbors to the east are protected as they develop their condo units. The sight lines as you come in to Lake Forest and the gateway that's there. In addition to which, to making sure, because Whole Foods is coming here and making a significant investment, making sure that it's functional. And when the neighbors come to shop there, and they will, to make sure that it works, that they're comfortable finding parking spaces, that they can pick up their food and put their food away, that there's restaurants and various services that will be there, and it's easy and convenient to get in and out. We've looked at traffic. We understand that people are concerned about cutting the Conway Farms Drive in Amberley Woods. Tim will talk about that. And Peter and David McCallum will talk about the design issues. But you can't look at any project unless looking at the economics. Obviously for us, we want to make sure that it's something that we can raise capital and financing and be successful and return money to our investors. Obviously that's not a purview of the Plan Commission. But we will also provide, we estimate, between $650,000 and $700,000 in revenue to the city of Lake Forest. In addition to our property taxes will be enough to provide, depending on what the average salary in Lake Forest is, I looked it up online, somewhere around 3 teacher salaries a year. So the city of Lake Forest will not only benefit from a great design, a great tenant, a great project, but also will have an economic benefit. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our next presenter, which will be Scott Salisbury, who's a regional vice president from Whole Foods, and he's going to talk about Whole Foods and what being here means to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill, and good evening. I can't tell you how excited Whole Foods Market is to potentially be part of this community. We're very involved in the communities that we operate in. We're a big part of the community. And we make great neighbors. We strongly support local suppliers and vendors, and we work very hard to get all their products in our stores and showcase them. And you know what? Our stores are really community gathering places with what we have planned for the store, be it a coffee bar, prepared foods, a wine bar, perhaps a tap room, a pub. All those things really create an ambiance where people want to stay, people want to linger, really create that community gathering place. And that's very important for us to provide to the community of Lake Forest. Our hours of operation will be roughly 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week. Our receiving hours will be 7 a.m. to 11 a.m., perhaps noon, so very reasonable receiving hours. We only receive a couple big semis a day, and we can work around those times to make it convenient for the community. There's one thing I did want to address. There was an issue with a comment that was made during an investor's call, a quarterly investor's call regarding Whole Foods Market and the fact that the Lake Forest store was signed and it was basically a done deal. And I want to apologize for that because it was not meant in that vein. We honor the approval process and getting all the permissions and working through this diligently with the city. So I just want to close in saying we are deeply committed to doing whatever it takes and working with the community to make this store a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The head of our engineer on this project is Bleck Engineering, and Mike Bleck is now going to discuss the engineering and detention issues on the site.
Good evening. I won't get into great detail, but I thought I'd give you kind of a high overview of the drainage for this site. We were the engineers for this project when it was built in 2007, and the detention for the project is taken care of on the east side of the project. There's 2 ponds over there, but it really is one detention pond with an equalizing pipe. The drainage for this site is all going from west to east, so the vast majority of the detention for this development is provided for in those 2 ponds. There was a storm sewer system that extends up Amberley Drive to the site. There's a 24-inch storm sewer stubbed into the property that's intended to be to pick up all the drainage from the parking lot and the development and take that to the detention basin. Currently, the project, that site's undeveloped, so that drainage is currently just sheet flowing east towards the condominium buildings. But when the property gets developed, that drainage will all be captured into the storm sewer and taken to the detention basin. The last thing I would say is there is a stormwater detention element as part of this project. There's about 50,000 square feet of permeable pavement proposed for the development to handle, to help manage the stormwater. So with that, I will conclude my remarks.
Thank you.
Tim Sjogren is now going to discuss the traffic and some of the issues that we looked at.
Good evening. My name is Tim Sjogren. I'm the Illinois manager of TADI, and we were asked to perform the various traffic studies and evaluations associated with the project. We worked very closely with the Illinois Department of Transportation as well as the city's traffic engineer to determine what exactly should be looked at. And here on the screen you can kind of see some of the locations that we were asked to evaluate. Right now, the study that we prepared is being reviewed by IDOT as well as by the city's engineer. Initial feedback from IDOT on the access plan, the proposal to put a right-in, right-out onto Illinois 60, as well as what we're talking about, has been very well received by IDOT. So we anticipate getting their comments soon and continuing that process. One of the things that we were careful to look at is operations at 60 and Saunders Road, that intersection. The site, for its proximity to that intersection, actually has a relatively minor impact. It's increasing traffic there by about 10%. And what we're proposing to do is to provide a second left turn lane, dual left turn lanes, on the east leg of 60 to help facilitate easier ingress to the site from the east. Another thing that we were asked to look at and have looked at very, very carefully is the potential for cut-through traffic using Conway Farms Drive. Myself, my staff, other members of the project team have literally driven the different routes that people might take to and from the site dozens of times and compared it under a variety of traffic conditions. And it's my professional opinion that the Conway Farms Drive roadway, with the exception of the residents that live in the immediately adjacent area, is not a viable cut-through route, and its use would be essentially negligible. So in summary, looking at the different things that we were asked to evaluate as part of this project, we believe that the traffic impact associated with this site can be managed, will be manageable. Thank you.
And my name's Sam Ankin. I'm with the Shiner Group, part of the development team. I thought I'd take a few minutes, maybe even less than that, just to go through some of the detail on the exact site plan itself. As you can see, we have 5 buildings that are dispersed through the site. One that's obviously the Whole Foods Market. 3 multi-tenant buildings that will consist of various retail users, restaurants, service uses, and a plan for a future full-service bank on the corner. Again, in terms of access to the site, just to clarify, the main access point will be a new access point created aligning with the office park to the west. And then, as Tim mentioned, there will be a limited right-in, right-out access point that we're looking for on Route 60. Part of that improvement that Tim was talking about, again, we're showing the dual left turn lanes that will alleviate some of the traffic concerns that are currently there on Sanders and 60. Some of the things Bill talked about that I just want to talk about briefly that we have worked with staff for the better part of a year is there are some conflicting interests on the site because there's really two pulling factors, one of which is the residential neighbors that are adjacent to the site, and then the interest that we had to preserve the streetscape because this is a viable entrance and really is the gateway to West Lake Forest. In terms of residential factors, one of the things that we did was increase the setback, the building setback, from the eastern property line. So the building setback is currently 86 feet as planned from that eastern setback, not including the 50-foot setback from our property line that will come to the future condominium building. In addition, the original plans that we've worked with in the past had the loading in this area, and that was what our original plans, working with Whole Foods, developing the site. But talking to the neighbors and talking to city staff, it seemed that creating the loading area most adjacent to the neighbors wasn't really the proper way. So what we did is we worked to relocate the primary loading away from the majority of the neighbors, the residential neighbors, so the loading would come in this area of the store right here and be fully screened 100% with a structural wall to the rear. So again, what we've worked on is reworking the site from a loading perspective, moving the entire site, reworking Whole Foods operations to really screen the loading from all the neighboring properties. One of the other interests in terms of the residential neighborhoods was working with the single-family home builder behind and city staff to maintain the residential feel of this portion. This is approximately the location where Amberley Court comes in now. So what we've worked for is there'll be no signage. This will be purely a secondary access point into the commercial development. As you can see, it's very heavily landscaped and will really have that residential wooded feel when you come into the development. And then we've created a secondary access point into Amberley Court that will have a boulevard feature, again, be heavily landscaped. So there will be a very delineated, clear separation between the commercial use, even if someone were to come into the secondary entrance point, and the residential feel from that side. Again, one of the other things we worked really hard with staff on in terms of various plan changes was as we pushed the property further away from the residents, we got tighter to Saunders Court, but we worked with the city to look at if there was any utilities or any issues with actually landscaping in the city right away along Saunders, and we're willing to enter into an agreement where we'd be able to landscape in the city right away, in the city setback along Saunders, and then we would take full responsibility, for maintenance of that as well. In terms of Route 60, from the other standpoint, in terms of other previous plans and other discussions, what we really felt was important is to eliminate any buildings that were hard pressed on the corner. So we really created, and again, David McCallum and Peter Theodore will talk more about, that open feature and the actual streetscape. But what we thought was important is to create, a significant feature that was open as you present into Lake Forest. And another thing that we thought was really important is to eliminate any signage on the corner. We wanted to feel that the project could stand for itself, the landscaping, the design could stand for itself. So there will be no identification signage, no monument signage, no big signage that you might typically see of a commercial development on this size on the corner, other than the current City of Lake Forest sign that's there. We'll have very minimal signage that really fits in with the neighborhood on the main entrance to the development across from the office park, and then on the limited right out access on 60. At this time, I'd like to bring up Peter Theodore, talk more about the architecture.
Good evening. My name is Peter Theodore. I'm a licensed architect in the state of Illinois. I'm also licensed throughout the United States. I've been an expert witness for the state of Illinois, guest speaking at DePaul University on urban design, and I served on the Architectural Commission for the City of Des Plaines. I've been involved in over 1,000 shopping centers nationwide, and I'm very proud to be here tonight. I wanted to start off with the site plan because, as Bill alluded to, it's a major departure from what developers typically do from a massing and density standpoint. Quickly, you see on the site plan that the buildings are pulled apart, the massing is taken off the street, and there's great emphasis on berms, landscaping, and actually opening up a view corridor so that we're sincere to the concept of creating a gateway feature that embraces the concepts of Lake Forest and not only meets the landscaping ordinance, but exceeds it. When you look at the plantings, you notice that there's extensive plantings and berms, and we can go to the next slide, not only on the periphery, but throughout the parking lot. The landscape islands throughout the parking lot, we'll go back one second, are triple in size of what you normally would see. And the landscaping in the parking lot not only is on the terminus of every island, but it's brought up against the building. When we go to the renderings, you're going to see that architecture, landscaping, trellises, vines all become part of this organic feel and embrace the architecture. These images that you see now are 3D renderings of the actual creation of what you'll see when it's constructed. They incorporate the species of trees, the berms, the positioning of the buildings relative to the site, and your sight lines. We'll go to the next slide. When we look at this slide, you can see that the normal tendency of developments is to mass on the corner, maximize your density, your retail square footage, but we did exactly the opposite here. We pulled the buildings apart and we created land and stone, stepped terraces of plantings, and we have a vast variety of plantings. The landscape architect joining me tonight was involved in Conway Farms. He was specifically chosen for this project because of his knowledge of the development adjacent to us, and working in conjunction with him, we felt that the emphasis really should be about setbacks, extensive landscaping, rolling berms, and maintaining the character that you find throughout the community. In fact, when we talked about the architecture, we looked at Conway Farms, Christ Church, and Market Square. I was married at St. Mary's. I've been in Lake Forest for quite a few years, and when you consider the quality, we go over to Market House and we spend quite a bit of time over in the square, and it's amazing how well the square has aged. For as old as the square is, it really still, it's aged gracefully. It's a beautiful place, and the ambiance of that is indicative of the character of Lake Forest to us. What we're doing here is we're drawing off of that vocabulary. We drew off of the vocabulary of the adjacencies around us. We looked at cedar shake roofs, the residential character and flavor of the neighborhood, and incorporated that into our retail architecture. This is not a Whole Foods that you'll find anywhere else in the country. This is a Whole Foods that belongs to Lake Forest and was designed specifically for Lake Forest. Every aspect of this plan is signature to Lake Forest. I'm very proud to be with Bill tonight. I've been with Bill for 30 years working on numerous projects, and he is truly a developer that stakes his reputation on doing the right thing and building quality projects. With that, I'm going to introduce David McCallum, our landscape architect. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you so much for your time. My name is David McCallum, and I'm the project landscape architect. As Peter had mentioned, the landscape treatment is one that's going to provide not only an attractive setting for this proposed development, but also an effective transition to the neighboring properties, and as importantly, a gateway from the west into the city of Lake Forest. The plan calls for the addition of over 270 new shade, evergreen, and ornamental trees. As Peter had mentioned, we have landscaping within the parking lot itself, which will consist of shade trees and then a combination of ornamental grasses and flowering shrubs. Adjacent to the east property line and to the south property line, we'll be installing at a minimum 10-foot high evergreen trees. There are some existing trees along the south property line that will remain, and within those areas will be clustered the 10-foot evergreen trees. The photo that you see on the screen right now reflects the various varieties of trees, shrubs, evergreens, perennials, and grasses that we have proposed for the site. I believe you have in your packet a detailed landscape plan, and they reflect the types of plants that you see on the screen. There is an extensive amount of landscaping adjacent to Saunders Road as well as Route 60. We'll have a combination of evergreen trees, shade trees, ornamentals, and large waves of perennials, ornamental grasses, and shrubs. As part of the gateway feature, we've left open the area at the corner of Saunders and Route 60 for a gateway feature. What that includes is a series of terraced walls constructed of land and stone, and within each one of those terraces, a combination of some ornamental grasses, some flowering shrubs, and some native and adaptive trees. That same type of treatment is found adjacent to the right-of-way along Saunders, as well as Route 60. One thing that we have found, the artist did just a wonderful job in representing the landscape proposal. You get a very accurate representation of what we have on our proposed landscape plan. There you'll see the combination of the terraced landscape walls, the large mass plantings of waves of grasses and shrubs, as well as the undulation of the berms that are proposed along Route 60. And that's the general overview of the landscape proposal.
That summarizes, we expect to be back at Plan Commission for a much more detailed presentation, but because it's informational, we've tried to keep it as short and as quick as we possibly could. But as I want to emphasize, this for us is a privilege to be presenting to the city of Lake Forest, and if we're fortunate to have Whole Foods here, I think the city is going to be very proud of what we develop. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer those. Thank you.
Okay. Kathy?
Thank you, Chairman Lay, members of the commission. I'd like to cover 3 items in my comments. I'd like to provide a little bit of background on the Amberley Woods development. I'd like to talk about process, and then to just reiterate what this meeting really is intended to do tonight and the outcome that we hope for. First, in 2006, the Amberley Woods development was approved as a comprehensive development. The total property was just over 38 acres. The development was comprised of really 3 components. It was a mixed-use development. It's in the transitional district. It was approved through a special use permit. That special use permit approved 24 single-family homes on the south half of the property. At the very southern edge, there is a preserved wetland area. In the northeast quadrant of the property, 2 condominium buildings were approved. One of those buildings is complete and is fully occupied. Each of those buildings was approved for 45 units. And the northwest quadrant of the property is the property that is the subject of the discussion tonight. That property today could be developed with 2 office buildings totaling approximately 42,000 square feet each. Those buildings, as originally approved, were configured generally toward the northwest corner of the property, one running east-west along Route 60, one running north-south along Saunders Road. In addition, on the northwest quadrant of the property, there is an existing historic residence. As part of the Amberley Woods development, that residence was designated as a local landmark. As part of the original approvals, there was approval for adaptive reuses in that house that included use as a restaurant, use as offices, as a bank, or childcare and various other uses. As part of the discussion of the original Amberley Woods, there was a lot of focus on preservation of the corridor along Route 60. What should that corridor look like as people enter Lake Forest? That is a very prominent entrance. Certainly Conway Office Park on the north side of the road has an elegant understated entrance with the pillars. There's significant setbacks as you move toward the east on Route 60. There was a requirement established for a 150-foot setback on this northwest quadrant of the property. There was also discussion about tree preservation, recognizing that a significant number of trees would be lost, but there also was a discussion about tree preservation as well. This was recognized as a non-residential portion of the Amberley Woods development. What you have before you tonight is a request to amend the special use permit as it pertains to the northwest quadrant of the property. Essentially, approve alternative uses and approve a revised site plan. You heard several times tonight there have been discussions for a while going on between city staff and the developer. I do want to be clear that city staff has not, we've only recently received some of the technical information. None of those reviews have been completed. For instance, the city engineer has not completed review of the drainage plan. The city arborist has not completed review of the tree removal plan, the proposed landscape plan. And we really wanted to bring this to you at this early stage of discussions. It is a significant project. It's a large project as projects go in Lake Forest. It is a different type of project, and it is in a prominent location. So we really felt it was important before we got further along in the review process to introduce the project both to the Plan Commission and to the community. There has been some information in the press about it. Not all of that has been accurate, so we wanted to make sure to allow the developers to come forward and explain for themselves what's proposed. To date, the city staff has had no conversations with any representatives from Whole Foods. We've talked with Mr. Shiner and his development team. The process from here, tonight, we hope to get some extensive comments from the Plan Commission, from the public, to hear your questions. We don't expect to answer those tonight, but those questions are important to help us frame our review and our discussions going forward with the developer. We'd like to hear concerns. We'd like to hear about strengths of the project, certainly to hear about any red flags. So this really is an opportunity for staff and for the developers to listen, take good notes, so that we can work through this project and ideally bring you back something that appropriately balances all the interests. The Plan Commission will ultimately be asked to make a recommendation on the request to amend the special use permit, as well as there is some reconfiguration of lots within this area, so the re-subdivision aspect is really a minor piece of this. But you will be asked to make a recommendation to the City Council essentially on the site plan and the proposed uses and overall development. The Building Review Board, as we move through this process, will be involved. They will look specifically at the architectural design of the buildings, at the material, at the massing, building heights, architectural styles. They will look at the hardscape, exterior lighting, building lighting, signage, and landscaping. The Historic Preservation Commission will also need to be involved later in the process to evaluate the request for approval of demolition of the residence that's on the property. So that's the process looking forward. Recommendations from all three of those bodies will go to the City Council, and the City Council ultimately is the body that will be required to balance all of those interests and determine what is appropriate for the city at this location. So I invite your comments as well as those from members of the public. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I think we should entertain some initial questions from the commission to the petitioner. So, Augie, start with you.
Yes, thank you, Mike. I think one of the main questions that's at least in my mind is traffic and the traffic flow. And I say to myself, okay, if I'm on Waukegan Road heading north, coming from Deerfield, say, I have the option of heading north to 60, turning west, and going to the new development. If I go that route, I have a stoplight at Everett Road. Continuing north, I have a stoplight at Sunset Foods. I have a third stoplight at the high school. I have a fourth stoplight at Route 60. I then turn west, and I have a fifth stoplight in Amberley Woods. I have a sixth stoplight at Conway Farms Drive, and I have a seventh stoplight outside the front door of the property. If I travel a different route, and I choose to turn left at Everett Road, I have one stoplight. I travel west on Everett Road to Conway Farms Drive. I turn right, and I take Conway Farms Drive heading north. That path then takes me to Amberley Road, I believe it is, the back way in. And I end up with one stoplight and two stop signs versus seven stoplights. I find it hard to believe that Conway Farms Drive won't be the cut-through when faced with those two options. Then I'm thinking, I'm coming in from the west, let's say Riverwoods, and I have the option to take Riverwoods Road north to 60. I have a stoplight at Costco. I turn east, and I go over the tollway, which I believe is two more stoplights. and a fourth stoplight at the front door to the development. I have the other option of, at the roundabout, going east on Everett Road, turning north on Conway Farms Drive, and I have 2 stop signs to get to the development. So coming from the south, coming from the west, clearly Conway Farms Drive is less stopping, shorter distance in a couple cases, and I just find it hard to believe that that won't be the new cut-through to get to the development. That's a concern.
Is that a question, sir?
It's a question in the form of, I heard the traffic consultant say in his opinion, it won't become the cut-through. And I'm thinking out loud and asking, what's the basis for that opinion? Because living in town tells me something different.
Can I call him up?
Yes, please.
Tim?
That's a very good question, and when I was looking at this initially, particularly your comment about the number of stoplights, and then particularly given traffic congestion on Waukegan, it's something that we wanted to look at really carefully. Because the people that will be shopping here, particularly those that live in the community, are going to be aware of the different routes. So what we did on 3 different occasions in a variety of time periods, but favoring the evening rush hour when traffic was the heaviest, is we literally drove each one of these routes simultaneously. And we compared in a variety of making it through one stoplight but not making it through the other, the different travel times associated with the routes from the southeast, just as you were describing. Mm-hmm. And what we found is that both in terms of distance and in terms of travel time, there was not any advantage. In fact, there was a disadvantage to use Everett Road and Conway Farms Drive. The degree to which there was a disadvantage for the cut-through route was somewhat surprising to me, but verified by multiple runs, and we could certainly provide to the commission as well as to the engineer the specific data that was gathered. So that's the reason for that comment. We can certainly take a look at your concern about the questions from the west. We did not look at that yet.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for city staff, if I may. Mr. Shiner mentioned an economic benefit to the full development of the site as proposed as having about an $825,000 impact both on the sales tax level, property tax, city school tax basis. That's versus what under the present zoning? What has been the projected generation of revenue to the city for if we did nothing?
In 2006, when the office development was proposed for the site, there was a projection, but that's not something I have off the top of my head, but we can certainly include that in the information that we provide to you.
Be an interesting.
We will also involve our finance director as part of the overall staff reviews to provide some review and analysis.
Okay. I don't have any further questions right now until comments.
I have Mr. Shiner, I have a question about your your project narrative. In at least 2, if not more, places, the paragraph near the bottom, you say, our team continues to receive support from neighboring residents, associations, and businesses. Then on page 2, the second paragraph, it said, in fact, directly adjacent residential neighbors are in full support of the project. Is that in writing? Do you have that? Exactly what did you mean by those 2 statements?
Huh? No, I can address it. It is not in writing. What we've worked with the adjoining home builder, and I'm not sure if he has a representative here or not, and we've worked with Ann Danner, who owns the vacant parcel that will be the second tower. If you'd like, and they could speak tonight, if you'd like to have them do that. So we have talked to them, we've worked with them, and we believe that they will support the development. We met with the adjoining condo board. I do not have a poll of the members. My guess would be they have not put a support in writing. I know some of them are here. They can speak for themselves. We won't speak for them. We believe that we had a positive meeting with them. I also believe in that board that it would not be unanimous within the people that live there. But I think that the two closest neighbors, which would be the potential home builder and Mrs. Danner, would support that, and I think they'll speak to that point tonight.
Okay. Does that person referred to, does that person intend to testify as part of the public hearing process? Okay, thank you. Okay, further questions of the commission to the petitioner?
Not just yet.
Or to staff? Okay. Okay, at this time, then, I'd like to, since this is an informal informational meeting, I won't swear everybody in. I will at the formal public hearing, but for those members of the public who are here, we are now happy to listen to your comments and testimony.
Good evening. My name is John Somberg. I live at 210 Saunders and own that property, which is a little bit south and across the Saunders Road to the southwest. I was always opposed to the development of south of 60 in an office, business, industrial area. Unfortunately, many of us in the neighborhood lost that battle. So when you compare this development to what could be with another large office building, I think this is maybe more attractive. But there are several concerns. One, I think, has been raised, and that is the traffic pattern. And of course, if you are doing a traffic test and you're sort of an agent of somebody, you're going to drive the speed limit, you're going to obey everything, it's going to be on a nice day and that. Conway Farms Drive has tremendous limitations. It was really built for a very small community. I remember hearing it and saying, oh, it was very pleasant to have a nice small winding road. That may be the case, but if we put even 10% more traffic on that, it's going to be a disaster. All you have to do is park one truck along the way that's doing landscaping or something, and it becomes a one-lane road, and you have to alternate, and it becomes very dangerous. So thought has to be given to possibly disconnecting that shortcut. Another thing that I see here is that this is a very sparse landscaping. We had the same problem on the other side with the Opus development at one time, and it's gone back and forth. And I remember this building council 10 years ago talking about how the promises were not met. This is as sparse as that, and there's a very heavily treed area. So I think emphasis should be given to try to maintain that as much as possible, and to screen that area. It's a gateway can also be interpreted as a chasm, and just view all the way back. So I think for the neighbors, especially not the ones directly there, because those are a condominium, etc., but for the people who bought into this area or who have inherited for generations, this was a country area, not even in Lake Forest at that time. And these are 3, 4, 5, and 6 acre properties, and we went for that seclusion. So I think thought should be given to screen as much as possible behind the area. And I am concerned about my neighbor to the east with that loading dock. I have a loading dock opposite my area from the office development, which is problems. They've been kind and not picked up the garbage at 4 in the morning and things like that. But I think we have to really be concerned about that consideration of bringing in trucks, and what one says, well, we're only going to do between 7 and noon. That's now. but the demands, the economic concerns, the delivery concerns, the traffic on 60, et cetera, may demand other times. So I think more thought should be given to the placement of that, and maybe not put it in the back, but put it in more up front on a side pattern where it wouldn't impact on the neighbors to the south. Otherwise, I must say this is a good start, and I leave it to you gentlemen to protect us country folk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
I limp a little bit up there.
That's fine. Please state your name and address, please.
My name is Robert Seiler. I live at 130 South Bradford Court in the community called Stonebridge, which is just to the east of Conway Farms Road at the north end of Conway Farms. I am here tonight along with John Donovan, who also is a resident of Stonebridge. John and I are both on the homeowners board, Homeowners Association board at Stonebridge. John is the president, I'm the secretary. We're not here speaking on behalf of the association because we've not had an opportunity to get our full board together to discuss this issue. However, I have a 4-page written presentation that obviously will not fit within your 5-minute time frame. I have copies that I will leave with Kathy, sufficient copies for each member of the Plan Commission and several for the public. What I would like to do is to go back through some of the issues that we see in connection with this proposal. If you look beyond the gloss of the presentation tonight, I think you will see that there are some worrisome issues for the residents, at least of Stonebridge, and we think of the greater community of Lake Forest. Two of the experts that testified here tonight, and I know I don't need to tell you that notwithstanding expert testimony, there's plenty of room for differences of opinion with the layman. One of the experts, the traffic expert, indicated that he'd been asked to evaluate certain portions of the traffic. It would seem that the only portions he evaluated were Waukegan Road, Route 60 from Waukegan Road to Saunders Road, and Conway Farms Drive, looking at the issue of cut-through. Nobody has been to Stonebridge to talk to us from any of the developers. The traffic expert never bothered, apparently, to drive from the entrance to the park, Town Line Park, off Route 60, which is Old Bridge Road, through Stonebridge. Stonebridge is currently a cut-through for residents of both Amberley and Conway Farms. In doing so, they miss one stoplight, and only one, and there's enough incentive there for cut-throughs. That cut-through gives us traffic problems because of the curving roads. It gives us speed problems. We've been talking to the city about those issues, asking for some remediation. Secondly, the other issue that was talked about by an expert had to do with the ponds. The pond that now lies to the east of the condo buildings, which takes their stormwater, drains into a pond that is owned by Stonebridge on the west side of Conway Farms Road. That pond, in turn, drains into 2 ponds on our property, and from there into a runoff that ultimately finds its way into the North Branch of the Chicago River. Apparently, the engineer has not noticed that any more stormwater that is processed as a result of the additional parking area is going to run into our ponds. We, Stonebridge, have the responsibility for maintaining those ponds. A pond is only as good as its drainage, and over the years, ponds tend to fill up and have to be dredged. We've estimated the cost of dredging our ponds at $100,000. The experts, the developers, have not talked about the effect that their drainage is going to have upon Stonebridge. So they've missed 2 very important issues as far as Stonebridge is concerned, which I think casts some doubt upon the validity of their expertise. What I would like to do in the time remaining to me is to just mention 2 things. I shouldn't say two things, several very important things. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be heard. And with that opportunity comes an opportunity to listen, and we thank you for listening to us here tonight. One thing I want to call your attention to is this publication put out by the City of Lake Forest. It says at the beginning, Lake Forest is best described by the things that matter most to the people who live here. That's a very good standard, I think, for the Plan Commission to apply in evaluating this proposal. Several of the issues, the gateway issue, you've heard that referred to. There has been a group of people from the office buildings, from Stonebridge, from Conway Farms, and from Amberley Woods that have met with the city in an attempt to beautify Route 60. They've done a pretty good job of it. I do not see that representation in any way adds to the beautification of Route 60 at all. It shows you a series of retail stores, all of which have large signs. There's no need for a sign at the corner of Route 60 and Saunders if you can see the signs on the buildings. And those signs are all lit. Those signs combined with the parking lot lights are going to make that corner a sore thumb at nighttime. When you compare it to the surrounding areas, none of them are lit up like that. So that thing's going to stand out there like nobody's business, and I don't think that's adding to the beauty of Route 60, our gateway to Lake Forest.
Sir, could you wind it up, because you've gone beyond the 5 minutes.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that I talked so fast or slowly. I'm not sure which. Yeah, there's one other issue I think that we need to take into consideration as far as Whole Foods is concerned. Two. One is, what's the secondary use for that building? I point out that at the corner of Park Avenue and Route 41, there was a high-end grocery store that did not succeed. That property down there looks like the devil. It now has a Staples store, it has a health and fitness center, and it has a large doctor's office. And it has about 3/4 of the parking lot empty, all paved over. I also see that they're suggesting a restaurant. We're hearing that Levels is going to close down. These are both very competitive businesses, and I think in part of your consideration of this project, you ought to think in terms of what might these secondary uses be for the buildings on that property. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. And I take your additional things you might wanted to say were included in your written statement?
Yes.
Fine. We'll look forward to receiving it. Ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for letting me have the opportunity to speak. My name is Ann Danner. I live at 485 Hunter Lane. I am a resident of the Lake Forest for almost 20 years now. I'm also the owner and president of Residential Homes of America, who was the developer and the builder of the first 45 condominium units, and also the developer and the general contractor that did the roads, the infrastructure, and everything at Amberley Woods. I also represent the ownership group of the second pad, and I don't know if we can maybe bring up that slide, but I guess I'm arguably the closest neighbor and the most impacted because the potential of that second building of 45 units is the pad that we own. So in addition to thanking you, it's right where Mr. Ankin put the red line. That's going to be the second 45-unit building. I'd also like to thank the development group and the owner of this property for taking a project that's been stalled since 2008 and breathing some life into it. I think it's an excellent opportunity. We are in full support of this project. It's fiscally responsible. You've heard the numbers. I know you're going to compare them, but office buildings generally don't throw off a lot of tax revenue. It's also comes to us with a reputable, not only developer, but the gold standard in retail, and that's Whole Foods. I also think that the layout is superior in its planning. They have looked at every buffer. There's buffers here that aren't really easy to see with this overview, but I've looked into all the buffers because I'm so impacted by the proximity of that second building that I'm quite sure that it's going to be preferable to those new neighbors to look at a 2-story, 1.5-story shopping center than to look at a 3-story office building. And I think there's a good example across the way on Field Drive also, where I had my office for almost 10 years, to look up at glass office buildings that have lights on most of the night. I think this is just a far superior plan to that. So as a resident, developer, contractor, and owner representative of probably the biggest buffer to everybody else in the neighborhood, and a very large stakeholder, considering that we're going down 24,000 square feet from 95 to 71,000, the reduced height, I would like to thank this developer, and I would hope that you seriously consider this project. I think it's a great boon to the neighborhood and to Lake Forest, and thank you very much for hearing me tonight.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. My name is Richard Ernest. I reside at 1800 Amberley Court. You can just see the corner of that building. I'd like to start by thanking you guys for volunteering your time. I served 6 years in those chairs on the City Council. I'm a 31-year resident. I'm also on the homeowners board of the building of 1800 Amberley that exists for the 45 residents. It's a difficult job you have because of the residential nature of this and the ever-changing nature of this whole area. And it's always tough when you hear from citizens that have lived in a rather rural environment to see growth surround them. There's no question about it. I don't have to tell you guys, you've heard enough presentations to know that this is a first-class developer. There are, all of the proposals that come before you are not represented by this caliber of developer. The Amberley Woods Homeowners Association will try to take a position, but I think Mr. Shiner said it fairly, with 45 residents, we will not be unanimous. But we will try to represent a position of the homeowners in that building at some point. There are some concerns that we have, of course, one concern that hasn't been mentioned at all is security. And obviously, we would love to have some walkway access into the site from our building, but we'd also like to prevent walkway access to our property from visiting people. So a little bit of a problem there, but I think that's something that we would like to hear addressed, and that word has not come up at all in all the testimony. The second thing that I think is of significance, and that is that Amberley Road is a private road. We have the obligation as homeowners there to maintain it. In fact, Ann is in the process of resurfacing it. And once she has completed that as a developer, it will fall on the residents. There will ultimately be 90 units in the condominium and 24 single-family homes, and a portion of this commercial property that will have to support that road. As much as no one has mentioned this, Saunders Road is currently a closed road that is fully paved through. And it is closed for the benefit of 4 residents. And we will have some 114 residents or homeowners, more than that in terms of residents, that are along Amberley. So I'd like you to have your own traffic people and your own staff consider the permanent opening of Saunders Road. I think that that would help completely spread out some of the congestion that might be envisioned. Something to be considered. But I welcome your deliberation. I know that it ultimately will take a lot of your time to get through this, and I do appreciate your volunteer efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ernest. Gentleman in the back row.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is John Isherwood, 1804 North Napier Boulevard, Naperville, Illinois. I represent K of Canadian Homes. We are the contract purchaser and future home builder of the 22 single-family homes to the south of this development. I first want to compliment the Shiner Group on reaching out to us, on working with us to make sure that the site design was compatible with the adjacent residential uses. As Ann had indicated, there's significant buffers that they have included as part of their design process, and we are in full support of the project. One thing that I do want to talk through is the entrance to Amberley Road, which is the entrance to, it's a private road. It's the entrance to the single-family home Amberley Courtyard. If you can pull the site plan up. Originally, their boulevard, which you see running north and south adjacent right there, is currently actually contemplated at Saunders Road. We think it's a better fit here at the kind of north edge of our property. By also including landscape screening within that boulevard, we are screening a lot of uses to the Whole Foods building. Additionally, another accommodation that the developer was happy to make was to provide a direct residential walkway from the Amberley Woods Courtyard community to Whole Foods. You can see it there outlined with the crosswalk. Originally, it was contemplated that the sidewalk would go all the way out to Saunders Road and then traverse up Saunders Road and then come back into the development. We believe that the retail nature of this site is a benefit for not only our future residents, but all residents of the community. There is not a lot of retail and restaurant use nearby outside of the Costco. And we think it will be a benefit to our future home buyers. I'll wrap up with kind of just doing a juxtaposition against what is currently approved, which is 3-story office buildings. All of these buildings are 1.5 story. The sight lines from the Amberley Woods community will be better than what they are with the office buildings. The impacts on Saunders and 60, I think, will provide a better sight line and view corridors than the office buildings would provide. And as the builder who is going to be selling homes to future residents, we look forward to resolution on this site, because knowing what's going to be there, especially a Whole Foods and other restaurants, is a lot better than the absolute unknown. And I've heard from office developers that this would not be a viable development in the current economic state. And so we'd rather see it developed in the next couple of years than have it sit in its current state. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Isherwood. Yes, ma'am, lady in the back corner.
Thank you for your time tonight. My name is Mary Lou Reed. I live at 1715 Broadland Lane. I would like to say that over the course of development of listening to the development of this Amberley Woods property, this is the most egregious and offensive development I've seen in the course of the 10 years. The Route 60 corridor plan adopted by the City of Lake Forest called for no commercial development on the Route 60 corridor, and this is obviously diametrically opposed to that. Over the course of 10 years, the development of the corridor along Route 60 has consisted of a community park, a donation to open lands, the building of the Stonebridge development, and the starting of the Amberley Woods development. This is a residential community. It's not a shopping mall. People live here in their homes quietly. It's a residential neighborhood. The clear cutting of the woods and the destruction of a historic building is really awful. The size and dimension of a grocery store and several other outbuildings with the attendant amount of asphalt and brick and mortar is untenable. The drainage problem, and you're going to drain into the ponds at Amberley and on Conway Farms Drive, those ponds overflow now. I don't know how it's going to take any more stormwater. The traffic this would bring to the Conway Farms neighborhood is untenable. We would have to consider closing Amberley Court altogether and making it a dead-end street and making sure that Saunders Road was never opened. Conway Farms Drive was never intended to be a cut-through or a main thoroughfare. It's a small community. There is probably not enough lipstick in the world to make this pig acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I am Sissy Capola and live at 1800 Amberley Court, Unit 402. My husband and I have lived in Lake Forest for over 19 years, the past 3 years at Amberley Woods. Our unit, which is one of 45 condominiums, is on the top floor, southwest corner of the building, which is directly east of the proposed site. I object to the proposed plan for the following reasons. The current berm buffer that runs along Route 60 from Saunders Road to the proposed new right-in, right-out entrance will be removed, which will increase the already deafening noise level. Also, the view from our west windows, which is our living room and a bedroom, currently is wooded. Once the woods are removed, we will be looking at the stoplight at Saunders Road and Route 60, Interstate 94, and Route 60. The traffic and noise these two highways generate is considerable. Over 100 mature trees, along with the original Tudor mansion, will be destroyed. The proposed right-in, right-out entrance off of Route 60 going south will run along Amberley Woods lot line with no buffer of any kind in the plan. 360 planned parking spaces is approximately twice the size of the parking lot at Sunset Foods, which will increase noise and security risks for the neighborhood residents, along with increased traffic on Amberley Court, which is a small private road. The hours of Whole Foods stores are 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week, which in my opinion is unacceptable in a residential neighborhood. If my husband and I had known the property west of us was going to have a big box store on it, such as Whole Foods, we would have never purchased a condominium at Amberley Woods. Now we are faced with the possibility of our property values decreasing. These are a few of the reasons I object to this proposed amendment to the special use permit. Thank you.
Thank you. I think somebody way in the last row on the left here.
Good evening. My name is Keith Krebs, and I live at 1815 Amberley Court. And for the record, nobody has talked with us, and we live right on Amberley Court. The condos have one point of view, but they're back in a little bit off the court. We have relatively small lots, so our house is very close to Amberley Court. So, and the gentleman from Cahove talks about what he thinks future residents will think of the development. Nobody has talked to the current residents of the development, of which I am one of the two homes, courtyard homes, that's currently in the area. So traffic is my main concern. Obviously, the office buildings would have some traffic, but a big grocery store would have a lot more traffic. The traffic design and the timing that was done, I think, is flawed. If we could put that chart up again with the alternate cut-through route that was analyzed. The red line on that isn't the route that people would take. To the concern of the commissioner to your left, Chairman Lay. When we get that up, you can see my point. See how that red line goes and goes up through Conway Farms Drive? And then it goes back up to Route 60 where there's a stoplight. Nobody would go that far north. And then it goes back further west to where there's another stoplight. And this is why that cut-through route is taking more time than the blue line. People will go up the red line to Conway Farms Drive and take a left before they get up to 60 onto Amberley Court, which is a private road when my house is right on top of it. And they'll cut through that way, eliminating the two stoplights, and then the cut-through route will be faster than the current blue line there. So there definitely will be people cutting through there, and they'll go right by my front yard, which is about probably 45 feet from my front window of my house. And the second issue with that's the inbound cut-through route. Nobody's talked about the impact on outbound traffic. Right now, if you're going north on Saunders Road and you want to make a left onto Route 60, about 3 cars can get through that stoplight making a left turn right there right now, every cycle. About 3 cars can get through there. That's something that would need to be changed, because otherwise people are going to come out of Whole Foods and see that traffic backed up, and they're going to make a left turn and do the reverse of that amended red line. That's going to happen. And I can't imagine IDOT wanting to increase that cycle time of that left turn, because that's just going to shut down traffic on Route 60 even more. So there's a big traffic problem that needs to be understood from the perspective of a resident. And a couple people have talked about the drainage issue either. There have been a couple storms this spring where my house has just about been an island. The condos are up. We've heard from people that are on the 4th floor. Whereas my house, I'm on the ground floor. And we're almost an island, and those detention ponds can't take any more water. So whatever building review study needs to be done with whatever goes into that property needs to have some improved drainage in this whole area, because those ponds, when we get, most recently we had 2.5 inches of rain in a 3-hour period, and then in April before that, and in January before that, those ponds 3 times in the last year have been near to overflowing to wonder, am I going to be able to get out of my house? So those would be my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Yes, back here, and then this gentleman over here to my right. You're next. After.
You can use that same slide up. My name is John Donovan. I live in Stonebridge. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association. To amplify the most recent speaker's issue with the shortcut, Stonebridge is just to the west, or I'm sorry, to the east of Conway Farms Road, and right, and the street is called Old Bridge there, and then curves around up to 60 in the park. So even without that development that you're talking about tonight, a lot of people use that cutoff to avoid really one stoplight. They would certainly be motivated to use that cutoff to avoid 2 stoplights, particularly with the exit strategy he's talking about. If you want to go out and turn right, it's way easier to go out and go through Stonebridge and Amberley. One of the issues, the reason that people so commonly use that cutoff now is the timing of the lights at Conway Farms Road and 60. If you're going westbound, you have a very short left turn lane, but the intersection is shut down for quite a long time because the other turn signal goes on. So whether it's, I've actually timed it, it's a fair amount of time, but it's even more frustrating when you sit at that intersection and nothing is going anywhere. There isn't anybody turning left, there isn't anybody going across the street, the whole intersection is shut down. So it gives you the impression that this is a very, very long time. So I think that's why psychologically, I virtually always come in through the park. And because that is such a big, long, curvy street with no lights, looks like you're in the middle of a field, I've seen cars come 50 miles an hour through there. Especially as you get to the corner. They don't appreciate that they're even coming into a residential neighborhood until they're around the corner. So, I see that problem just getting much, much worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name's Greg Ewert. We live, we're one of the individual residents on Saunders Road, so we actually live just south of the barricade that's been referred to. So our property, we live on 5 acres and it abuts the south, it'd actually be the southeast corner or southwest corner of this development. Just a couple questions on those, a couple comments on those questions. You know, Saunders Road was closed and there's actually 6 houses in there on our end, another house that was just demolished. But what happened there, that was really to prevent traffic from going through there when all the office stuff got built. I mean, I have 2 little kids. We had people going by their 50 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour, so the police were good, and they sat out there and they nailed people all the time going through there. But obviously, I didn't want one of my kids hit. So there was a lot of issues with traffic.
Could you speak into the mic?
Sure.
Thank
So
you.
there was a lot of issues with traffic and people cutting through. So there's been over the years, you know, some changes with that. Now with the golf tournament that they just had too, they opened up that road for a short period of time. It was the same thing. I mean, the buses were flying through there at a high rate of speed too. So there would be quite a uproar, I think, amongst us who live in there to let traffic go through there. I mean, that was never, I don't believe, ever planned to be changed, and that barricade I don't think was ever planned to be taken down. But I just want to go back and really talk about the project at hand here. You know, one thing it'd be nice if we could get some of the information maybe a little bit ahead of time, just because we only had about a week or so to kind of prepare for this at all and be aware of this. And I think, as Mr. Shiner said at the beginning, they've been working on this for a year, so it'd been nice if we could have maybe known a little bit ahead of time too. But I was actually very, and I can speak for a lot of my neighbors, very, very surprised to actually see, you know, something like this proposed for the area. I mean, we've been there, honestly, since before Conway Farms was even developed. There was no homes. We were there when the golf course started. And for the entire time, and I have lots of planning commission notes here going back to 2000, the concern always, and I underline always, was about traffic in that area. The initial, I think Kathy can probably verify this, the initial concern and the initial development at that corner, or that whole 40 acres, was actually going to be, I believe, about 39 homes. They didn't do that primarily with fear over, quote, soccer moms. They were worried about too much traffic. It went round and round and round, and there's plenty of things that came and went. You know, it took, I think, 6 or 7 years, court battles and everything else, before what was finally decided upon and how it was left until this possibility came up and how that property was going to be developed. So I think that history is important, because for years it's always been the concern over traffic there. So now we've gone from 39 soccer moms to 300 plus, maybe 400 parking places, I believe, in the Conway neighborhood market, which is kind of interesting too. I mean, I think we should really just be honest and kind of call it what it is too. It's a Whole Foods. Our concern also is with the outlots there too. I mean, there's been no mention specifically what those are. The Whole Foods hours of operation from 8 to 10 are a little bit of a concern. The outlot buildings, I mean, I can only imagine what that would be. I know they say restaurants. We're fearful that would be fast food, and the traffic and the lights and everything else that would bring with it too. Another concern for 13 plus years on the area of this was even just public safety. Again, that barricade was put in there to prevent traffic volume, plus high rate of speed traveling down that road. Even still, we sit at the end of the barricade. There's often, and the police are good about doing this, truckers, people, and everything sitting down there at the end. In the Opus development on the other side, there are a couple parking spots that are down there that are never ever used by the Opus building people, but other people come in late at night and just park there. Landscape is certainly a concern. I don't know, when the developers for the homes were here a couple months ago, my neighbors and I spoke about our concern over the development. As a couple people have mentioned, across the street on Opus, one of the concerns was the canopy of trees. I mean, there are tiny trees there now. The huge trees that were there are gone. Similar to this development too, as a couple people have mentioned, you know, even one of the commissioners mentioned, and I have it in the notes here, you know, they were worried that apparently those trees in that area are about 127 years old. He specifically mentioned it. He specifically found out. So these are very old trees that are there. Obviously, that's going to be wiped out. I mean, most of that, obviously, you know, I know they're going from a 95,000 to 71,000 square foot, but the footprint of that is flat, one level. I mean, it's not 3 levels at 14,000 times 3 is 42,000 per building on the 2 buildings. That would have been a smaller footprint than obviously than this development's going to be. Again, as I mentioned, traffic is a big concern continuously. You know, the word gateway gets mentioned all the time too, as this being the gateway to Lake Forest. You know, I really don't think if you'd bring those commissioners back from 5, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I can guarantee you, I mean, I'm positive this is not what they had in mind for the gateway to Lake Forest. You know, interestingly, just to throw this in here, we're talking to my son who was out of town, and we told him what's going to happen. His first word that came out of his mouth is Vernon Hills. I mean, that's a lot what this is. It's like Route 60 driving down into Vernon Hills, big box store, 45,000 square feet, a Best Buy with things around it and everything too. So I mean, we're fearful that's what this is. We're fearful it's very close to our house. And we're hopeful that, you know, people will see this kind of more for what it is. And as many people have mentioned, trying to maintain kind of the charm and character of Lake Forest. You know, I think West Lake Forest is really kind of changing a lot. Got it. West Lake Forest is changing a lot, and we just hope that, I mean, this is going to be a permanent fixture. Either we keep it the way it is and or look for something else, or we're going to be stuck with something like this forever. Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. Further individuals wishing to testify? Yes, please.
Hi, Dara Azari, Amberley Court, Unit 201. Thanks for the opportunity to express some concerns. Many of my points have been touched on already. I'm a longtime shopper at Whole Foods from years back. You can't hear. Oh, sorry.
Speak into the mic, please. Thank you.
And there every Saturday morning at Deerfield. Where's Scott? There he is. And shopped at Fresh Fields and Wild Oats before there was Whole Foods. Sorry, I have a cold. I'm just trying to gather information to determine whether I want to live adjacent to one. As I said, some of these points have been touched on, but I want to express some concerns that I have. When Building 1 was constructed at Amberley Woods, the proposed site was used for staging. If the site is developed and any construction was ever to take place on what is now Pad 2, where would that be staged? To follow up on Sissy's point, she talked about the impact of property values. Can that be quantified? And the impact on property values to homes in close proximity to new Whole Food site locations, perhaps using Park Ridge as an example, one of your more recent stores, comparable in size. My third point, runoff from Pod, what is now called Pod 2, is an issue. When you use the west exit to walk your dog, you wade through a river of mud. And again, to follow up on the gentleman's point from Stonegate, when he referred to the corner of Park Avenue and Route 41, what is the contingency plan should the anchor store Whole Foods not be granted approval? If developed, would a pervious surface be used to mitigate runoff? And how will water influence Pad 2 in the interim until and if it's ever developed. I personally am concerned about the environmental integrity of the area. I love where I live. I love the trees. There's a difference between the trees that have lived there for 100 years and trees that are transplanted. And can it be specifically identified which trees will be lost and spared? This has been mentioned, but I'm not sure if I have a clear understanding on what will be done to maintain and enhance the buffer. What other locations are under consideration by Whole Foods should you not be granted approval? Again, following up on that previous gentleman's point, does the project go through? Does it continue on? He mentioned that a high-end grocery store was there and left, and there's now a Staples, a health center, and some other stores. And I don't have a clear understanding for the immediate residents, the 45 families in Building 1, as to what is going to be done specifically to improve site ingress and egress and how that will impact us. Because I know you're going to have to capture that westbound traffic, and I would like to understand better how it's going to impact the residents of Building 1. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further individuals wishing to comment? Yes, please.
I'm Joseph McLaughlin at 830 Lane, Lorraine. I don't really have a dog in this fight because we, as you know, live a little bit farther away, but and I'm only a one-year Lake Forest resident. But a couple of questions came to mind as I saw the presentation. I think 150-foot setback was mentioned for the original zoning, and I look at this picture here, and that doesn't look like 150 feet to me. So obviously there have been some changes made. I look at the landscaping and the setback of this unit relative to the property at Sunset Foods or either the Dominic's properties on Waukegan Road, and this doesn't look quite right to me relative to those developments in terms of the impact on their view from the street. So one question I would have as a Lake Forest resident would be, how do these specs compare not to general shopping centers? Because obviously that's not going to fly here in Lake Forest, but how do those compare to existing developments, that are already in place at Sunset and at both of the Dominic's properties? The other question I would have would be, echoing some of the other comments, the retail properties. Obviously Whole Foods is an anchor tenant. To me is fairly attractive relative to other things that could be in there. I'd certainly prefer that to office buildings. But are there statistics? I understand the developers cannot guarantee, obviously, what kinds of or what specific establishments are going to be in those outlot buildings, but even just some general survey data around what typically would go into a development of this type. Would we see fast food restaurants? Would we see dry cleaners? Would we see martial arts studios? What sorts of things would we typically would you typically expect to move into a property like this would certainly be of interest. That's it.
Thank you. Additional people who would like to comment or provide testimony? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the next phase, which, Kathy, any staff response to public testimony?
Just two comments. One, there was a comment made about Saunders Road. A number of years ago, I believe when the second Opus office building was constructed, a portion of Saunders Road is vacated, so it is only public right-of-way between Route 60 and the point at which Amberley Court intersects Saunders Road. So the point from there to the barricade is actually private property, and it is owned by the owner of the office building. So I just wanted to clarify that that used to be right-of-way. I believe it was county right-of-way at one point and then became city, but it is no longer under the city's control. And second, I just wanted to note that There is a sign-up sheet at the back of the room. Obviously, this petition will come before the Plan Commission. If you did not receive notice, or if you want to have notice sent to you other than just addressed to resident, please sign up on that sheet and we'll make sure you get on the list. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Petitioner rebuttal of anything that has been said after your presentation?
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity. What we'll do is we'll listen. We've taken notes, and when we come back, we will appropriately respond. We don't think as an informational meeting it's appropriate this time, but we'll certainly come back at our next meeting, and we've heard everyone's concerns. We will address them, and we'll take the time at that point in time.
Okay.
So thank you very much, and again, thank all the
Why
residents.
don't you remain there in case,
Sure.
Does any of the members of the commission have questions for the petitioner?
I have a couple quick thoughts and questions, if I could, Mr. Commissioner. First of all, just a general observation, based on my experience in and around the shopping center industry. First of all, I'd just like to commend the petitioners on the quality of the presentation, and I would also echo Mr. Theodore's comments that this plan as presented is certainly a vastly different plan and very much an accommodation to an improved vision for a shopping center asset versus many in greater Chicagoland, and even some of the better, more visually impactful shopping center assets in our surrounding communities. One of the things that I like about this plan is the lack of shop space, frankly. You do have a quote-unquote big box. There's no getting around the fact that there's a big box back there, but there's also not 40,000 square feet of highly speculative shop space that can or cannot be leased on any given day of the week. And so the potential eyesore of seeing vacancies adjacent to the anchor tenant is not something that we will be concerned with in this project to the extent that others may be. Which is great, and I also think that preserves the nature and quality of our shop space tenants in Market Square to a much better extent than what otherwise could happen. So another positive, I think the comments that I'm hearing from many residents indicate that we are seeing sales migrate out of Lake Forest into adjoining communities. We're seeing people leave Lake Forest to shop Whole Foods in Deerfield. We're seeing residents of Lake Forest leave for Libertyville now and shop the Mariano's that's now available in Libertyville. And I think what that is a reflection of the fact that there's demand in our community for a superior grocery asset that doesn't currently exist on a full service level in our community. So I can't think of a better solution to that than Whole Foods. That said, I think, Mr. Shiner, what we're hearing is there's still a lot of questions to be posed with respect to traffic and routing. I think I'd like to see a much more exhaustive study with respect to what can happen on Conway Farms Drive and Amberley Woods to prevent all the concerns that you've been hearing tonight. I think the landscape plan could probably reflect the potential preservation of some of the mature trees that exist on the property right now, and whether or not any of those can be saved and integrated into the project very specifically. And I think on an overall level, just taking a step back, I'd like to see everyone consider the fact that from a big picture perspective, we're not comparing what's being proposed today to a grove of mature trees. We're comparing it, or being asked to compare it, to what could be constructed under the present zoning. So rather than talk about runoff created from this project specifically, and this is what I'd ask of city staff, let's compare it to what could be created when a series of 3-level office buildings are constructed there. Is it detrimental to that by comparison, or is it better than that by comparison? I'd like to see the same thing done on the financial level. I'd like to see the same thing done on a sightline and visibility perspective. In other words, you're not going to You're no longer going to look at a grove of trees, but you're going to look at the lights potentially in the evening of another office building. So let's compare apples to apples, I think, going forward, and I think we'd all be better served as a result. That's what I have.
No questions.
Okay, any comments in terms of issues that, beyond the traffic one that you raised, Augie, that you would like to ensure that gets looked at before this comes back to us?
The only thing that crossed my mind in addition to traffic is the concern about the stormwater management. And maybe just the question of, maybe too technical, but I'll ask it just because it's in the back of my mind. In order to manage the water that falls on the parking lot that eventually ends up in a pond, does there need to be restriction that collects water in the parking lot temporarily?
Commissioner, I'm sorry. I think what's really important is, because this is an informational meeting, we have done all the technical aspects, but that's going to be an extensive presentation. We had a limit of 20 minutes tonight, and I think at the next Plan Commission, I think we've been working with staff, and the engineers are currently reviewing it. And so prior to the next meeting, I assume the review will be complete. We'll have all those answers for you. Okay. But we've worked in that. We've looked at it extensively. We've looked at all the issues that were raised extensively, but because of the nature of this meeting, we basically were limited, we limited ourselves basically to 2 minutes for traffic, 2 minutes for engineering, just to get an overview and understand what the issues are. But we have looked at all of these issues pretty extensively, so now that they've been crystallized tonight, we can make a full presentation that will, answer, I think, most of the questions. Now, whether or not they address all the concerns and everyone will be happy with the answers, we certainly can't guarantee that. But we have looked extensively at all the questions that have been raised tonight, including this one. So at the next meeting, we'll actually have a full engineering presentation.
Good. I just have a couple of questions or issues that I would like, when you come back, to be able to answer. The first one is, what kind of non-barrier discouragement factors could be built into this in terms of the traffic to really discourage traffic on both Amberley Woods and Conway Farms Drive to the south of the proposed ways to discourage traffic, to ameliorate what Commissioner Ziccarelli raised. But the second question goes to the heart of what will happen in reality to the second tower and the building of the homes along to the south. I have to wonder whether or not the kind of proposed development, if approved and constructed, won't really discourage that second tower from ever being built, number one, and that the other single-family vacant lots now along Amberley Woods Drive will become undesirable places to build because of its close proximity. I understand the closeness to be able to walk there, and I suppose that's an advantage. But Ann Danner testified that the owners of that site are in support of this. Well, if this goes in, will in effect it become unmarketable for a second tower? The second tower properties, would they be unmarketable, being that close? So that's a question I would like some answers to when you come back on this.
We'll absolutely have an answer for that.
Okay.
As I said, I just want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank all the residents for their comments, pro and con. We appreciate it. We'll try to address as many of the concerns as we can. And thank you very much. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Good. And thank you all who came tonight. And please continue your interest in this project. And Kathy, this will be coming back to us when, likely?
I can't say for sure right now. I think we need to digest the information that we've received.
Okay.
I also will note that we will put something on our website that just gives updates on this project, so you can also track it that way.
Good. But thank you all for attending this evening, and we look for your continued interest in this topic and your input to our deliberations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. I would ask at this time whether or not there's any public testimony on any non-agenda items. Is there anybody here from the public that would like to talk to something other than the two items that were before us? Seeing none. Additional information from staff.
You do have a calendar before you for meeting dates for next year, for 2014. I believe all of those dates are on your regular second Wednesday of the month. I don't think any of those fell on holidays. Certainly they're subject to cancellation or change, but it would be helpful if you're comfortable with those to take action to approve it.
Okay. I would suggest maybe wait till the next meeting until more members are here. Does that make sense?
That's a good call. Since you only have 3 anyway, you really can't vote.
Would you like a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I will declare it adjourned, seeing no objection. So ordered. But it is 9 o'clock sharp.
Thank you.
I expected more vehement opposition.
I don't really. Like Jeff said, I think, people are looking for someplace close, someplace nice, someplace that we don't have.